We are delighted that you're here. And just a few housekeeping items up front. In the back, Tom Miller, our treasurer. If you'd like to become a member of Appleton Historical Society or renew, you can certainly do that back there. We also have some great events coming up. Tomorrow night, our Thursday night at the museum is a bike ride. It is History's Mysteries by Bicycle. It's a casual bike ride, probably about 6 miles and about 8 to 10 miles an hour. So very casual, lots of fun. You can get more information about all of our events that are coming up at appletonhistory.com. And of course, you can ask any of our board members who are throughout the audience if you have any particular questions. We're always happy to help. So, all right, so tonight we have got Joe Gaerthofner. He was raised in Appleton. He's a graduate of Xavier High School. He received his BS from the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh and works in sales at Nordon Business Environments. It's a local company that was started by his grandfather. He works alongside his father Jim and brother Andy. Joe has a passion for history, particularly as it relates to Appleton and Wisconsin. Over the years, he's enjoyed writing articles about local history, teaching history to homeschool groups, and leading walking tours at Riverside Cemetery in an effort to shine a light on Appleton's proud military tradition. He and his wife Jen and their son Elijah reside here in Appleton. So, welcome, Joe. We're really excited to have you tonight.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thanks, Gwen. Thank you to the Historical Society for inviting me here tonight, and thank you all for coming out. Really do appreciate that. As Gwen mentioned, I'm a huge fan of history, as all of you are, and especially when it comes to military history. And it's not just military history, it's the connection to Appleton. If you go back all the way to the Civil War, any major battle, theater of conflict since the Civil War, I can almost guarantee you that Appleton does have a connection to it. So tonight I'm excited to talk about one of those conflicts that Appleton was involved with in World War II, specifically in the Pacific War. Okay? I'm very ambitious with my slides tonight. I may have had too many slides in this, so if things go crazy and go bonkers, full refund. Gwen will get you a full refund for your mission fee tonight. So, all right, so here we go. Start with a quote here from the Appleton Post-Crescent 9 months after World War II ends. Of all the shoulder patches worn by the soldiers who have come home to Appleton, gone through Appleton or visited in Appleton, the one that's most familiar and probably held in highest regard by Appletonians is the Red Arrow. Red Arrow. So we're going to be talking about that quite a bit here tonight. 4 sections tonight I want to cover here with you all. First of all, what is the Red Arrow? Second, what's Appleton's connection to the Red Arrow? And third, the experience in World War II. What was their experience in World War II? And finally, at the end, we're going to talk a little bit about how Appleton celebrated and honored these men that we're going to talk about tonight after the war. Okay? Code 1420. Do I need to worry about that? Are they kicking me out already, Katie? All right. We'll move on. Yeah, we'll move on ahead. All right. So the Red Arrow. Talking about the symbol right there. Some of you may have seen that before. Maybe you've seen it in one of the 5 parks in the state of Wisconsin named the Red Arrow. Abbotsford, Manitowoc, Oshkosh, or maybe Marinette or Milwaukee. 5 Red Arrow parks in the state of Wisconsin. Or maybe you have seen the symbol, the Red Arrow symbol, before when traveling on Highway 32. So the natural question is, you ask yourself, why is the Red Arrow symbol on Highway 32? And the easy answer is that is the name of the division, 32nd Infantry Division. The Red Arrow is the nickname of that particular division. We'll talk about it a little bit here tonight, but a majority, more than half of the soldiers that would serve in the 32nd we were going to talk about tonight were from Wisconsin. So Highway 32 it's the red line there on the map. That's Highway 32. Starts way down Racine, goes all the way up to the UP. 1951, the state of Wisconsin dedicates Highway 32 as a memorial highway. And that's why if you ever cruise on 32 now you know why that symbol is on there. So where exactly did the red arrow name come from? And that goes back to World War I. Specifically towards the end of World War I, the United States had asked all infantry divisions to come up with a name, nickname, if you will, or something that people could refer to a division by, their division by. So the commander of the 32nd Division came up with the red arrow. I've included 3 maps here. These are from France in World War I. The straight line or the curvy line represents the good guy, the bad guy, battle line, and the arrow is showing the 32nd piercing through that line. His quote was, "We pierced every line the Boche, the Germans, put before us." The red arrow was never stopped, never held back in World War I. They were the first ones to go through the Hindenburg Line in World War I, which was a pretty big deal. According to the Journal Sentinel, the picture there on the left is the first known image of the red arrow. It was seen on an artillery piece, and right there on the right is something similar to, we don't know exactly what military piece it was on, but it would, the symbol right here would probably be on the other side over here, right there. Probably a French 35 millimeter, but something similar to that. Okay, so according to the Journal Sentinel, the first time we see this particular signal or symbol in picture format. So what exactly is a division? We talked about the red arrow, the nickname. It's for the 32nd Division. What is a division? So with this awesome chart that my better half created, let's kind of walk you through it here. We're talking about the 32nd Division in World War II. So this is what, as a reference point, we're going to use here. 32nd Division. As you can see on the bottom, during World War II, a division was made up from anywhere from 10,000 to 15,000 soldiers. The 32nd would be made up into 4 subcategories, if you will. 3 of them will be regiments, called the 126th Regiment, 127th Regiment, 128th Regiment, and the 4th section we'll talk about here in a second. So underneath each of the regiments, there are 12 blocks, and they will start with the letter A and go through the letter M, skipping 1 letter. And if you're observant, it's not a typo. There's a reason. J, Company J is never used in military terms, so that's why you see it missing on that one. So 12 companies, as you can see down below in World War I, was anywhere from 100 to 250 soldiers. You combine these 12 companies, you form a regiment. And in 32nd Division, you had 3 regiments. These companies would be based out of local communities, such as Appleton, Oshkosh, Fond du Lac, Neenah. 4th column on the side is the specialty military units. There was a whole other category of soldiers that were part of the 32nd Division, such as the artillery, engineer, medical, military police. So that would be covered in that 4th section. But by and large, tonight what I want you to remember is specifically what I highlighted there, that Company D of the 127th Regiment of the 32nd Division as we move forward. Okay? So what's the connection here? What is the connection to Appleton, the Red Arrow? And for that, you actually have to go back to 1881 when Wisconsin, Appleton, I should say, Appleton, their militia, their local militia, joined the Wisconsin National Guard. And they are going to be called Company G of the 2nd Wisconsin National Guard. Company G would be something that Appletonians would refer to for a number of years. That's how they would remember the National Guard unit based out of Appleton as Company G. So Company G would be based out of Appleton, and they would participate in the Spanish-American War, 1898. They would specifically be in Puerto Rico. The image you see there on the left is the Company G in 1897 standing in front of the first armory that Appleton had. We'll Talk about the second one here in a second. And the good-looking guy there on the right, that's Major Joseph Marston. Anybody who knows me, I cannot go a presentation or walk without mentioning Joseph Marston. So he actually was the first leader of the Company G when they were formed as a National Guard unit. Okay, he goes back to the Civil War. Those of you not familiar with Marston, he was in the Iron Brigade, and he led a company of soldiers that were from Appleton in the Iron Brigade. All right, so on the left there, probably a lot of you have seen that. That is the second armory in Appleton, called the Company G Armory. If you're not familiar with it, it's located where the new Trout Museum is right now. Okay, it's built in 1904, and it was purchased in 1969 by Lawrence University, who immediately demolished it. The Appleton unit would end up going to Spencer Street. That would be their new armory. So this was torn down in 1969, almost 65 years to the day when it was occupied. On the right there are actually some pieces from the armory you see there on the left that are been restored and kept into the current renovated armory that's here in Appleton. All right, so Company G, move forward a little bit into June 1916. There's a conflict, kind of an unknown conflict, or unknown if you will, is the Mexican border war that happens in 1916. Basically, the U.S. was after Pancho Villa, and almost all of the National Guard units throughout the country were called to serve, and Company G was sent down to Texas. They would be stationed down in Texas. They would not see any action into Mexico going after Pancho Villa, but what they did receive was professional military training by the U.S. Army. They would be there from June 1916 to February 1917. And why was that important? Because 2 months later, the United States would be in World War I. They would declare war on Germany. So, as the United States Army, you need troops, right? You're going to declare war on somebody, you better get some troops going. So all the National Guard units were called up or federalized into the U.S. Army. In Wisconsin's case, all of the National Guard units were called together along with, which is about, I think it was about 18,000 soldiers from Wisconsin. They would join up with about 8,000 soldiers from Michigan, National Guard units from Michigan, and they would form a division, a brand new division called the 32nd Division. So the 32nd was made up of all the Wisconsin National Guardsmen and about 8,000 Michigan National Guardsmen. However, there was 3 exceptions to that Wisconsin rule that I just said to you. Companies E, F, and G from the 2nd Regiment, Appleton, Oshkosh, and Fond du Lac, were actually pulled from the 32nd Division, and they would join a brand new division called the 42nd Division, or their nickname was called the Rainbow Division. Because the Chief of Staff of that new division, 42nd, Douglas MacArthur, he pulled National Guard units from 26 states, and he said he wanted to have it so it reached from one end of the U.S. to the other like a rainbow, hence the nickname of the Red Arrow Division, the Rainbow Division. Here's Company G in front of the Armory, July 20th, 1917. Way on the left side, you'll be kind of staring down at Lawrence University, way down there. A couple days later, they would be pulled and start training. Oops, I gotta use this one. There you go. This one is in August. They take one last final picture in front of the Armory when they are going to be called down to serve training Camp Douglas. However, which I just mentioned to you, they're going to be pulled with Oshkosh and Fond du Lac's company because they are going to go to New York to start their training for World War I. World War I. So this new division that the Appleton National Guard Company that we call Company G is now going to be called Company A. It's a machine gun battalion along with the Oshkosh and Fond du Lac companies. Okay? These 3 units are going to be part of what's called a machine gun battalion. The star of the show is this guy right here, and that is a Hotchkiss machine gun. A real bad boy. It would shoot about 400 to 500 rounds a minute, 8mm rounds, anywhere from 1,000 to 3,000 yards. Something you do not want to go in front of. So Appleton had a specialty unit, and it was called, when Appleton, Oshkosh, and Fond du Lac were pulled, it was told that they wanted the best unit out there to be part of the 42nd Division, and that is why Appleton was called, okay? They would be a machine gun unit. All right, World War I, their experience, still calling them Old Company G, because that's what everybody in Appleton still called them. They left for war to Europe in 1917 with 155 men. 18 would die in service, 12 of which would die in combat. Best research that we have is 40 men from Appleton would die in service in World War I. I say best research we have because sometimes where people said that where they were from wasn't necessarily true. They were by a nearby village or town, so they would say Appleton or vice versa, okay? So 40 men in World War I died from Appleton. Picture you see in front of you there, that is a funeral procession in June of 1921 when two soldiers from Old Company G were killed in World War I. And the two sergeants' bodies were brought to Appleton, and the whole Appleton business district, College Avenue, shut down for the afternoon as a funeral procession was led from the county courthouse all the way to Riverside and St. Joe's Cemetery. Okay, the picture that you see right over here, it's my understanding, is where the current PAC is. Just to give you some perspective. We have a bunch more pictures of this particular event over there on the table, so if you have a chance afterwards, check it out. We have pictures from the route all the way from the beginning to the end of it, which is pretty cool. It gives you some other images of Appleton. All right, so after World War I, Appleton, Oshkosh, and Fond du Lac come back, and they are going to rejoin their National Guard units from the Red Arrow. Appleton was now going to be referred to as Company D in the 120th Regiment. So if you remember that organizational chart before I showed you, I highlighted a D. That represents Company D, Appleton. They're going to be part of the 127th Regiment in the 32nd Division. 1927, that emblem you see there on the right becomes the symbol of the 127th Regiment. Now, because I think most of you that are still paying attention, you remember me saying that the Appleton unit was in the Rainbow Division, right? The other units were in the Red Arrow, so that's why you see both of those symbols on this particular shield. And the French phrase down there is added because the French during World War I had called the Rainbow or the Red Arrow Division the terrible ones for their fierce fighting. So they kept that in honor of soldiers from World War I. All right, this image is from July 1924 when Company D and 3,500 other National Guard soldiers were down in Camp Douglas for a couple weeks. There's about 55 men in this particular picture. All right, so let's move forward to about 15 years. We start with September 1939, and that is when Nazi Germany begins their conquest in Europe. They start in Poland, and then in early 1940, they set their sights onto Western Europe, specifically France, Belgium, the lowlands there. It's when France gets taken over by Nazi Germany that the United States decide we better start getting prepared for something because we are probably going to get involved. So the Appleton Company, Company D, was going to start a different type of training. They were no longer going to be a machine gun unit, but they were going to be a heavy anti-tank, heavy mortars unit. So what happens in 1940, later in that year we just talked about, the Wisconsin National Guard, along with other U.S. Army soldiers, will participate in what we call battle maneuvers, okay? Kind of think of war games, if you will. So 65,000 soldiers, again with Company D from Appleton, participate in what was nicknamed the Battle of Wisconsin. So 3-week time period, they were down by Camp McCoy in Wisconsin. And the goal out of these maneuvers was to assess the condition of the U.S. Army. And spoiler alert, they did not get very good reviews after several of these maneuvers. Got a good picture here from the Post Crescent as Company D was getting ready to ship out to Camp McCoy in that August. The picture on the left is, I like to say, answers the question that I've always wondered, which is how many Company D soldiers does it take to pack a trunk? And the answer is 4. The answer is 4. And apparently you also have to smoke at the same time, too. Picture on the right was just showing some soldiers here getting ready as they have their to-do list as they're heading down there.
Is that Yankee related to the funeral Yankee?
Great question. I do not know the answer to that. Especially his first name is a very German name as Herman, but that's a great question. That's a good question. Herman Yankee was killed in World War I from Company G from Appleton here too. So I just had to throw this map in here because I thought it was kind of cool. From the newspaper, Post Crescent, right before they shipped out down to Camp McCoy. And right over here, that's where the 32nd and our Appleton guys were hanging out. They were defending and protecting the thank you, of Sparta right over here. So they were protecting that. And these were the bad guys over here, okay? 3 weeks they were there stage. But never fear, Company D returns victorious after that. Here's a picture from August 31st as Company D returns home. And you might be able to see, there's the railroad. You see Appleton kind of hide there. And I don't know if you can see it well, but there's a little bit of an outline of the passenger train, passenger cars from the soldiers when they came home. So in front of them is a band, the 120th Field Artillery Band, which was actually attached to Company D. Company D was going to go through downtown Appleton to the Armory. That's where they're going to hang out there. All right. However, about 3 weeks later, FDR says that 35,000 National Guard men need to report for active duty on October 15th. And they are going to head down to Louisiana, and they are going to train there for about a year. Professional military training. They've read the reviews of the maneuvers so far, and they have been good. So Company D and the other Wisconsin National Guard units with the 32nd Division are going to be sent down to Louisiana. They're going to be gone for a full year. That's the plan. Here in Appleton, Company D, again based out of Appleton, Company D, they need to recruit more men because as you can see there on the bottom, Company D was asked to come up with 123 men in their company. It was said that, I think I found that right before this recruiting effort started, Appleton Company D had about 78 soldiers. So they had to come up with 45 new recruits in about 3 to 4 weeks. So Appleton really does a major recruiting effort to try to get these more men. Picture on the left, I don't see anybody on it, but I'd like to say the 2 soldiers are signing up, and I like to say the guy who's sitting down there, he's got the original laptop in front of him. I was going to ask the younger people here if they know what that is that he's using, but Elijah, you've already heard that one before. So there on the right is also some of the recruiting efforts. They have a machine gun that they're showing these potential recruits. Again, any way that they can to recruit more soldiers for Company D. As the recruiting efforts are going on, Appleton Post-Crescent will publish names and have more information of anyone who recruits. Again, who signs up. So the Appleton Post-Crescent was very helpful, if you will, to help getting more men into Company D. There will be daily reports on the Post-Crescent about who is signed up. October 15th was the big day because that is the day that Company D had to report at the Armory for duty, if you will. You're in the Army now. The red arrow was now officially in the U.S. Army. This picture is from that first day. We've got 2 pictures actually. The one on the left is the cook line, mess line, if you will. And then on the right is your old school two-armed dishwasher, cleaning up after the soldiers going through lines. So they were, Post Crescent published some of these images of what was going on in the Army that first day, October 15th. Now they would be, Company D would be in the Armory for 1 week. That would be their home for 1 week. Picture on the left, if you were cruising by, if you were cruising College Avenue during that week, most likely you are going to see what is shown on the left picture, which is a soldier on guard duty, okay? That is Francis Bellin in front there, and holding up that stone arch there is soon to be Lieutenant Ralph Schwerbel. And I have to mention him because at the time he's a sergeant. Before he signs up, he worked at the Post Crescent. So starting with the Louisiana maneuvers all the way into World War II, Ralph is going to write to the Post Crescent his experiences, and quite frequently, including taking pictures, and sends it back to the Post Crescent. So a number of these things that I'm going to show you next, we can attribute to Ralph Schwerbel here. All right, and even the field artillery band was being sent down. There were 29 men, I believe, that were recruited. And I don't know if you can see it well enough. I don't know if you can, but that would be right there. That's you can kind of sort of see the arrow in there. He's wearing a red arrow patch in that particular uniform picture. All right, I love this one here too. So Company D was also recruiting non-humans. They put out this ad during their recruitment effort. Who's got an ugly-looking bulldog with a sweet disposition they would like to be without? Company D, which will go to Louisiana for a year, wants a mascot and would prefer a bulldog. Well, there must have been a shortage of bulldogs in Appleton because they ended up with a German Shepherd. And his name was Zip. Now, because I know somebody will ask me the question, what happened to Zip? I don't know what happened to Zip. So if somebody does, please let me know afterwards. Also is kind of cool is on Zip's coat there, that is this symbol right here. That's the 127th logo. So he's wearing that little patch there too, Zip. I had to throw that story in there. October 22nd, Appleton says goodbye to Company D. It's estimated, Post Crescent says about 10,000 people said goodbye to Company D as they shipped out to Louisiana. The Appleton Post Crescent said, quote, the young guardsmen in vicinity got a send-off they will never forget, unquote. What is wild to think about at this particular day as they're going to be shipped down to Louisiana, Company D as a unit will not return to Appleton until 1946, about 5.5 years later. Little did anyone know that they would not be back for a number of years, which we'll get into why here in a second. So they, going back to Louisiana maneuvers, Company D reports to Camp Beauregard in Louisiana in 1940, the end of 1940, and they're going to stay there for a couple months into 1941. The soldiers talk about their experience in Camp Beauregard in not so good terms, so they nicknamed it Camp Disregard. Clever nickname. Early 1941, they will move to Camp Livingston in Louisiana. Apologize for the picture. It was very hard actually to find a good overview picture of Camp Livingston. And that's where Company D and the Red Arrow would be housed for the rest of their training. About 27,000 soldiers would be there. Some 900 buildings were on the campgrounds, and over 700 tents would also be visible there at the camp. So while they're down in Louisiana, Appleton would get updates from our friend Ralph Schwerbel and other people. So I'm going to share some of the pictures that were sent back to Appleton while Company D was in Louisiana. So there on the left, they're pitching tents there. I think it's, under in kind of a forest, they said, as a camouflage to hide protection against enemy aircraft. On the right, that is kind of a mortar team, and this is a mortar. Again, the Appleton Company D was no longer a machine gun unit. They were a mortar unit, heavy weapons unit to go after tanks. Again, who has tanks? It's been very successful. The Germans. So a lot of the training that you're going to see here, we're going to talk about, and is preparation for the European war against Nazi Germany. A couple more pictures here, there on the left. And if any of you know of any of these men who you see here or have any connection to them, I would love to talk to you afterwards to find out more about them. There on the left, you got 4 guys doing the sighting. Yeah, the sighting circle, they called it. On the right, we have a machine gun unit. In particular, I'm going to point out here Elmer Reeder, Private Elmer Reeder there. We'll talk a little bit further about him as we go along.
And Herman Gehrman is my uncle. Herman Gehrman.
Nice. Okay, have you ever seen that picture before? Okay, cool. Love to talk to you about. Yeah.
Ed Paulsine is our dad.
There you go. Love it. Thank you. Perfect, Becky. Awesome. Okay.
And we have that picture.
Do you?
I believe we have that picture.
See, that's what I love about, because I was telling Gwen throughout this whole process I've been researching, I found like no information. It's been so challenging to find anything about these guys. And once you bring it up, we talk about it, we see a relation. That's awesome. Appleton did not forget about Company D during Christmas. Signing that right down there is Mayor Goodland. He's signing off his Christmas note, and the city is sending him off some cheese. Some cheese. Maybe they went over to Jacob's Meat Market and picked up some brats and sent them down there too. But they're sending that down there to Company D to remember them for Christmas. Another picture showing some of the formation training, tactical training that the soldiers were receiving down there. Again, they're receiving professional military training while they're there. So they're being introduced to a lot of new things and a lot of new skills, if you will. All right. This one picture is showing the guys in mess call. You see the tents behind them there. And what is interesting about this particular picture is that there are 8 soldiers identified in this picture. 2 of them would die in World War II. And we'll talk about them a little bit. The head or the commander of a company, his title is captain. And in this case, at this point of time, Captain Pate is the commander of Company D. And he says, I say Appleton can be well proud of this unit, Company D. He wrote that back to the Post-Crescent on the same day that this picture was. So I had to include that quote in here. Okay, they still receive more machine gun training, as you see here. This is a picture from May 1941. Several soldiers listed there. We're going to talk about Sergeant Orville Schneider in a little bit as well. And this picture is showing vehicle training. So soldiers from Company D are now being trained to operate, how do they describe it? Reconnaissance cars and weapon-carrying trucks in the company. I wanted to point out, I know this picture is kind of rough to see. This guy right here, that is Sheldon Howard. Howard. Thank you. So for those of you who don't know, his grandfather, J.J. Howard, ran a hardware store here in Appleton, and that's his grandson right there. And we'll talk about Sheldon a little bit as well. Now, at this time, this picture is in August 1941. We are being told, or the Company D is now being told that, remember, you guys are only going to serve in Louisiana for about a year. Well, we need you to train for a little bit more. So now they find out they're going to be in Louisiana another 3 months, which would put them into 1941 in training down in Louisiana.
42. 3 more months to take them into 42.
Oh, thank you. Yes, 42. Thank you. So I'm so happy somebody's paying attention as well. Thanks for that. Yes, Tom is right. 1942 is when they would still be in Louisiana. However, everything changes on December 7th, 1941. And that, of course, is when Pearl Harbor is attacked. The United States declares war on Japan, And I believe it's the next day Germany declares war on the United States, which was not a real good move, but they went ahead with it anyway. So as you can imagine, the Red Arrow and Company D are now going to have completely different orders. They're going to remain in Louisiana for a couple months in 1942. And as they are there, Appleton Post-Crescent starts to publish in a section called Who's Who in Company D. Again, you see that 127th Regiment, Company D. So they would have this little section in the newspaper about a couple of soldiers who were in Company D. And the very first one that I found were these two guys here on the left picture. There's Elmer Reeder there and Aaron Shabo. We'll also talk about Aaron. If you may have paid attention before, Aaron Shabo was one of the recruits in October, is when 1940, when he signed up with Company D.
My uncle is James Schreider.
Really? Okay.
Was James, yeah.
Did you know he was a dashing type?
I did not.
He was a dashing type, and he played football. He was a stenographer, and he was a bartender.
Yeah, at the Coach Lamp Inn.
Okay, so there you go. Free drinks for him tonight. Thank you. All right, so let's go back, or let's go forward now. What's going on in Europe? So naturally, as we're kind of saying, it's the vision that the Red Arrow is now going to go overseas to Europe to fight Nazi Germany. However, that changes in February 1942 as the Red Arrow, 32nd Division, is in Massachusetts, ready to go over to Europe. They get an email. Yes, some people are still paying attention. Good. So they get an email that they have to go to California, and you guys need to be there in April because you guys are not going to Europe. You're now going to Australia. You're going to fight in the Pacific. So you might ask yourself, why did they shift their orders from Europe to Japan? The easiest answer is after Pearl Harbor and into 1942, as symbolized by this red line that goes around the Pacific Ocean, that is how far the Japanese Empire has gotten to that point. MacArthur, who is one of the head commanders in the Pacific, desperately calls out to the United States, we need more divisions here to help us. The big concern is right down here in the bottom. If Japan can get into Australia, take over Australia, the Pacific Ocean is basically blocked off from the United States. So that is going to be the big concern that they have. Now, Company D, part of the Red Arrow, they're going to be shipped to Australia. And just to give you some points here of familiarity, they're going to land here in Brisbane, down here, and they're going to train at Camp Cable. This is New Guinea, and make sure I'm seeing it right here. Here are the Philippines, some areas I want you to kind of remember. And here's Japan, here's Pearl Harbor. So the Red Arrow is going to go all the way down to here, and their next operation will be up here in New Guinea, and that's what we're going to talk a little bit here too. Japan, in July of 1942, starts landing their troops onto New Guinea. And this is the moment where the Americans need to take the war to Japan. So the 32nd Division, the Red Arrow, will be called upon to knock the Japanese off of this island. Specifically, they want to prevent Japan from, there's a port right down here that they do not want them to have access to, which would take them right to Australia. The first, and this is a misprint, this isn't actually right, it's actually November 1942, Buna. That is where the first contact, the Americans against the Japanese, will be in World War II. And the 32nd Division will be the first unit to be on the offensive against the Japanese in World War II. Getting to Buna, again, the 32nd Division is now going into New Guinea in the fall of 1942. They will not only have troops landing over here in this harbor and walking through, I think I got a better picture of that. Yeah, right here. So Port Moresby right here, they're gonna land here. Some of the troops from the Red Arrow are gonna cross these mountains, and there's a great book that I'll show you at the end if you're ever interested, what these soldiers, some of the soldiers from the Red Arrow went through to climbing over this mountain, called Ghost Mountain is the nickname of it. The other troops from the Red Arrow would be airlifted outside of Buna. And why is that important? Because that's the first time in World War II that troops are airlifted to battle, and that's the Red Arrow. Red Arrow has that distinction as well. The first troops in World War II to be transported via airplane into the battle. All right, so as mentioned, the Red Arrow is going to start in November of 1942. They're going to start the battle, and I don't want you to get too lost on this picture. What the purpose of it, here's Buna, and this is what the Red Arrow is going to start their attack at. The goal is for New Guinea to start on the right side, if you will, of New Guinea and work their way up the northern coast of the island, and they're going to start at Buna. What I want you to take away from this particular picture is this stuff right here. Most of the terrain waterlogged is what the map says, because that is going to play a big part in the struggles that Red Arrow has in the Battle of Buna. So some of you may be familiar with that particular battle. It's the baptism fire for the Red Arrow. It becomes a very nasty war for the Red Arrow. That's their introduction into World War II, is fighting at Buna. Okay. All right, so I wanted to share some pictures that I found. Again, pictures were a little bit challenging to find of Buna, the Battle of Buna. This one is an outpost of some troops from the 127th. Maybe some of these guys are from Appleton Company D, we don't know. But we do know that Appleton served under the 127th Regiment. As you can see around the terrain there, it's kind of what you'd imagine, right? A jungle. There you go. Here's another picture of the 127th Regiment attacking Buna Mission. Again, some of these soldiers that you see in this picture could be from Appleton, could be from Company D. We don't know. They're unidentified. But I want to emphasize with this picture specifically is, remember back in Louisiana, Company D and the Red Arrow were fighting with the thought of going against Germany, right? A different type of terrain. Now they're going into jungles. The Red Arrow trained for almost, over a year in Louisiana for the Germans. They had almost no training of jungle warfare. Not only that, but their supplies are missing. They have horrible supply chain issues getting their supplies to Buna. Again, they're not trained for this jungle warfare. Matter of fact, there's a story about they didn't have camouflage uniforms. So they actually dyed their uniforms green. That worked great until it rained, right? And then it just, so they were short on a lot of things. And General MacArthur was really on the Red Arrow to get Buna, to take Buna. The general, the commander of the 32nd Division was fired weeks into the Battle of Buna because he wasn't going fast enough for MacArthur. There's a lot of issues going. It wasn't General Harding's problem. He ends up telling the next in command, General Eckelberger, that he says, take Buna or don't come back alive. So that's his orders, to have the Red Arrow take Buna. A couple pictures here again showing the terrain that I'm talking about. Remember, we talked about the waterlogged terrain. Picture on the left definitely shows you that. I want to read an excerpt from a really good military author named John McManus, one of his books, and he writes, mosquitoes seemed to breed by the second in the moldy swamps. Leeches preyed on the ankles and legs of anyone who waded through the water. Quote, our shoes were full of blood and those sores never went away, unquote. One of the afflicted wrote in his diary. Prodigious rains, usually falling in torrents at night, soaked everyone and everything. One-day totals of 6 to 10 inches were not uncommon. Quote, no one could remember when he had been dry, General Eichelberger wrote. quote, "The feet, arms, bellies, chest, armpits of my soldiers were hideous with jungle rot." It is estimated as well that during this campaign, that out of the 10,685 Red Arrow combat soldiers, which includes the Company D soldiers, about 8,200 of them were treated for disease, which included malaria, typhus, bad stuff. So think about that. 8 out of 10 soldiers, not only are they fighting against the Japanese in terrain that they're not used to, they're having supply issues, and oh, by the way, they're getting sick. You have an 80% chance of getting sick. Not a fun place to be in. This picture right here is one of my favorite pictures just because of, I think it kind of says it all of this Buna campaign, what this unidentified Red Arrow looks like here. You can just see it behind him is that open, probably a cartridge case or mortar case. He just looks beat. He just looks tired. He looks exhausted. I don't want to be here. Unshaven. Just symbolizes the nastiness of Buna. I encourage you to try to, there's a couple books I'll share with you at the end of finding out more about this campaign because it was just really nasty what the men went through. Let's see, there we go. So here's an overall, here's Buna. The Red Arrow will officially take Buna in early January, and they are going to move up the coast here. And I tried to highlight some of the areas that the Red Arrow was a part of. I did not highlight, which I should have. This island here, and Morotai Island up here. So all in all, the Red Arrow is going to be in this New Guinea area until the fall of 1944. They're going to spend a lot of time here in New Guinea in some nasty terrain. So the cost of this fighting here in the Buna and New Guinea area. This is a picture from Ralph Schwerbel, Lieutenant Ralph Schwerbel, and this is a cemetery near Buna, published in the Post-Crescent of showing the crosses that were buried in this particular cemetery. And the cost was not only high for the Red Arrow, but it was also very costly for Company D. These particular soldiers that I'll talk about here were killed in action during the Buna New Guinea campaign, starting with Corporal Robert Towson, graduate of Appleton High School in the spring of 1940, and he was one of the recruits who signed up in October 1940. He was 20 years old, and he was buried at the Manila American Military Cemetery in the Philippines. Corporal Daniel Jones was killed December 28th, 1942 at the age of 22. Unfortunately, this would not be the only tragedy that would bestow the Jones family in World War II.
Well, those two guys were neighbors.
Really?
One lived at 733 West 8th and the other one lived at 818 West.
Yeah, yes, you're right. Yes, yeah, yep, you're right. And that's why I wanted to throw the addresses on here because I thought it would be kind of fun for people to see that, where they lived, where the families were. The Jones family, as I mentioned, they would have they would have another tragedy during World War II. On October, let me see, I can make sure I get the right date on here. April 10th, 1945, 2nd Lieutenant Arthur Jones, Donald's older brother, was killed in action at the Battle of Okinawa. He has a third brother, Robert, who served in the Signal Corps and survived, as well as his sister, Betty, who served with the Waves. Pretty patriotic family there. Both of the Jones brothers' bodies would return home to be buried at St. Mary's Cemetery on March 24th, 1949. And this is a tough picture, but hopefully you can see the flag-wrapped caskets here in St. Mary's Church on that particular day when the Jones brothers, Private First Class Aaron Shabo, we introduced you as one of the new recruits in October 1940. He was killed in action outside of Buna in January 3rd, 1943, age 29, and he is buried overseas at the Manila American Military Cemetery. Sergeant James Brewer, 24 years old when he was killed in action, was a salesman with Gibson Automotive. So I thought that would be, kind of caught my eye when I saw that. He's a salesman. He was 24 years old, and his body was reburied at Riverside Cemetery here in Appleton. Corporal Stephen Verhagen, 26 years old when he's killed in action. Early December, he actually runs into his brother on New Guinea. They didn't know each other were there, but they ran into each other. And I was able to see some letters that both of them wrote home to mom and how excited they were to see each other. And the mom was quoted in the newspaper of saying how happy she was to know that before he died and before Christmas, the two brothers were able to see each other. So a really sad story. One of 4 brothers who served in the war. So Corporal Verhagen, we just, or right there, yep. And this gentleman, Soldier Private First Class Lawrence Gilkey, these were the first 2 Company D soldiers reported in the Appleton Post-Crescent as died overseas in World War II. Age 29, and he's also buried in Manila American Military Cemetery in the Philippines. Now, a soldier who fought in Buna that you probably have heard before is this soldier, Sergeant Elmer Burr. He was in Company I of the 127th Regiment. Again, remember, Appleton was Company D. The Nina unit, based out of Nina, was Company I. And Elmer served with that particular unit. December 24th, 1942, near Buna, he is killed in action. After his death, he is awarded the Medal of Honor. I'll read you the citation that went with that Medal of Honor. Sergeant Burr was cited for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action above and beyond the call of duty. During an attack, Burr saw an enemy grenade strike near his company commander. Instantly and with heroic self-sacrifice, he threw himself upon it, smothering the explosion with his body. So the Isle of Valor, maybe some of you have been there in Menasha, honors Elmer Burr and another soldier, Medal of Honor.
Stump.
Ken Stump, thank you. Ken Stump. Corporal Gene Burnett, he was killed on January 20th, 1943. According to the Post-Crescent, quote, the corporal, quote, volunteered to go out in an open sand pit in view of the enemy to dig an emplacement for a 37mm gun to be used to cover an attack by a company across the river. The corporal was killed while putting the gun into position in the front lines. The corporal would earn a Silver Star for his actions, and he was the first soldier killed from Kimberley in World War II. All right, so I mentioned the New Guinea campaign kind of wraps up at the latter part of 1944. The next mission that the United States wants to take on against Japan is taking over, what's shown there on the left are the Philippines. So that's going to be the next objective that the red arrow is going to be part of. Late 1944, the U.S. is now really on the offensive, and they're starting to push Japan back to their homeland. So the Philippines would be a huge win if the Allies got this, because each of these islands, as they're coming from Australia moving north, they're using those islands as places for airfields, aircraft. So there's a strategic reason why they're taking some of these islands you never heard of, because they have great ability to house airplanes. So the Philippines is the next one in fall of 1944. And it's also a very personal location for General MacArthur once again. Let's see, so the left here is the Philippines, and the first attack that the red arrow is going to be part of is on this island right here, Leyte Island, okay? Right here. And on the right here, this is Leyte right here, and the red arrow is actually going to be up over here. They will not go in with the first wave, but the red arrow will come in shortly behind as a reserve unit. And there he is right there. I shall return, he returned. That is on Leyte Beach. In 47 days of fighting on Leyte Island, the 32nd suffered 2,000 casualties. 450 soldiers were killed in action. On January 1st, 1943, the 32nd Division was relieved by the 77th Division. There would be one more battle on the Philippines that the Red Arrow would undertake to really take control of the Philippine Islands. Now, unfortunately, our correspondent to Appleton, Lieutenant Ralph Schwerbel, is killed in action on December 25th, 1944 in Leyte Island. I'll read a description that was published in the book Appleton in World War II. Quote, as the outfit was advancing deep into enemy territory, Lieutenant Schwerbel was given the assignment to assist the leading element when they contacted the enemy. Without hesitation and little regard for his own safety, Lieutenant Schwerbel began to maneuver his platoon into position to protect the entire unit. His efforts were short-lived as a Japanese sniper apparently picked him out as a leader. Lieutenant Schwerbel was 28 years old. So, after the battle in Leyte Island here, they are now going to focus on the biggest island in the Philippines, they being the US, the Allies, and this is where the Red Arrow was going to be going next. The top part is Luzon. Manila, the largest city in the Philippines, is in right up there. Where are you down there? There you go. Map on the right here. There's Manila. So the Red Arrow is going to, with other divisions, they are going to land over here, and their mission is to open up a trail to this open area here. The darker colors represent higher elevations, okay? The light color represents flat land. So they are trying to get into this flat open area, and it's the Red Arrow who's given the command to open that up via a trail that will lead from the west end into the central part of the island. Now this map is a map of what the trail is called, the Verde Trail. I thought this was a cool map to show. If you follow the trail, which kind of looks like a river, you will see some black arrows. And every time you see the 127th, that is the 127th Regiment, and that's where our Company D guys are going along this trail. Military writer Stephen Bateman describes it as, quote, the 27-mile-long Villa Verde Trail was a narrow, densely vegetated mountain path in the Caraballo Mountains defended by entrenched elements of the Japanese Army. Eliminating the enemy forces along the trail would secure one of the few routes to the valley in Luzon. And I have some pictures here to try to show you what the terrain in the island of Luzon and what these guys fought with. Luzon has a little bit of everything. It has mountains, it has jungles, it has urban areas. So it's a little bit of a combination. What the Red Arrow goes through during the trail is mountainous areas, lots of hills. So that comes into play during their trek through. This picture is of the 32nd unknown soldier there. This I thought was a really good picture to show. This is a company from the 128th Regiment of the 32nd Division, and they are showing how you would get supplies up over the mountain. And if you kind of see, it starts over there, and then it comes all the way up here. You kind of see they're each holding, carrying stuff the old-fashioned way up the mountain. Again, a lot of work, a lot of effort involved. Here's another view, which I thought was good to show the mountainous area. These are troops from the 126th as they're going down a hill in Luzon and the trail. This is towards the end of the trail as they make it through. Over 119 days of skirmishes, which included hand-to-hand combat engagements with the enemy at close range in caves and thick jungles, soldiers of the 32nd Infantry earned an incredible 28 Silver Stars, 20 Distinguished Service Crosses, and 4 Medals of Honor. That is all in the place we were just talking about, showing you the trail. A few months later, the Red Arrow in the 32nd Division would claim its biggest prize of the war, and that would be the capture of this man. On September 2nd, which is actually the same day the Japanese formally surrendered, signed off on the USS Missouri, Commander General Yamashita, the supreme commander of the Japanese Imperial Forces in the Philippines, he surrenders to the Red Arrow. And the commander of the 32nd Division said of it, it was a glorious end to a bitter struggle, that being the surrender and capture of this Japanese, a tough enemy. Matter of fact, he would end up being charged with war crimes, and he would be hanged in February 1946, found guilty of war crimes. Unfortunately, this trail was unkind to Company D as well. Sergeant Sheldon Howard, that I mentioned to you before, he would be killed on this particular trail, age 29, and he is buried at the Manila American Military Cemetery in the Philippines.
Is he related to the Howards that had the pet shop?
I'm going to ask somebody, what do you think, Gwen? I'm getting, the judges are saying yes. Yes, but good question. He's related to, in case nobody heard that before, his grandfather was J.J. Howard's hardware store. Private First Class Elmer Reeder. He was 27 years old when he was killed on March 17th, 1945, and he is buried at St. Joe's Cemetery here in Appleton.
Is he one of the Reeder families from Coleman's and Good Company?
Gwen?
No.
No, the answer is no. Oh, yeah, I know it's Reed, R-E-A-D-E-R. Yep. Sergeant Orville Schneider. One of the older soldiers in that particular company was 37 years old. On April 17th, the Post-Crescent reports that Sergeant Schneider recently received a Purple Heart, and that he was reported to have been his third time wounded during the war. And a terrible irony, that same day people in Appleton are reading about that, he is shot and seriously wounded on Luzon. He would die a few days later on April 21st, 1945, due to his injury. And there's there's two more soldiers we need to recognize here. Technical Sergeant Henry DeCuster. Anyone there? I apologize if I'm saying the name wrong. He was 26 years old when he died. Now, I haven't found exactly how he died, whether disease or killed in action. So still some more research to find out on that. But he passed away on August 5th, 1943. And he is buried at Holy Cross Cemetery in Kaukauna. And the 13th member of Company D who died during World War II is this man, Lieutenant Leroy Sather. Now, if you read this along with me, he was buried in France. The last point there too. How is that possible? Well, that we go back to the Louisiana maneuvers in late 1940 into 41, 42. He actually attends officers' school at Fort Benning. So he's going to attend officer training, and he will end up being transferred ultimately to serve under General Patton in the 3rd Division or 3rd Army in Europe. He's going to be killed in France, and he is buried overseas, military cemetery over in France. There's a total of 13 men from Company D from the original 123 that went over to the Pacific to fight in the war that would die. Okay, so we talked about these 13 men who died during the Pacific War itself.
Did you go back one? Does 530 West
Nope.
College Avenue still exist? Does anybody know?
I do
Is
not
that a
know.
residence or an apartment?
I don't. Anyone know if 530 West College Avenue still exists?
think
I
so.
don't know the answer to that.
500.
I know there's, well, one of the places we're going to talk about here in a second is no longer, well, it is around. So I can't answer that for you.
500 would be where the block after fighting is, like.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I can't answer that question for you.
It's a smoke shop.
It's a smoke shop. According to Google's, it's a smoke shop. All right, so 9 months after the war, the war ends in September 1945, and the 32nd Red Arrow is going to spend some time as an occupation unit in Japan. They're going to come back in 1946, and when they do, Appleton is going to honor Company D and the other men from Appleton who served in World War II with a big celebration on the weekend of June 14, 15, and 16 in 1946. Let's see, I hope you guys can see. I know this is a tough picture, but on the Friday, the events would start with a kids' parade for Flag Day. It was estimated that 200 children were part of this particular parade. They would go all the way through College Avenue and then to City Hall's, quote, velvety East Green lawn to the red, white, and blue draped parade viewing stand, unquote. And breaking news, Gwen is selling these bikes this weekend only. So the bikes you see there right there. So the next day was the big day for the celebration. That was on Saturday, June 15th. So the day would start, as the Appleton Post-Crescent says, quote, whistles at noon, quote, whistles blew and bells rang for a 5-minute period heralding the day. At 3 p.m., soldiers from Company D and other veterans from Appleton would parade from Drew and College Avenue, then west to Mason Street, then south to Spencer Street, and finally west to Goodland Field for a ceremony and program. The main speaker that day, and if any of you are more familiar with World War II, you would probably recognize this man, General Carl Toohey Spaatz. Really to summarize, he was a big deal. The Strategic Army Air Force in World War II, this was the man who was overseeing Europe, and then he eventually went over Japan, but that ended. He was a top general in the United States military, and he was going to be the speaker that day at Goodland Field, which is incredible. I have to mention this too because the Post-Crescent mentions that at noon on that Saturday, the general would land at the Winnebago County Airport in Oshkosh. From there, he would take a yacht across Lake Winnebago to North Shore Golf Course. From there, he would make his way to Appleton in time for the parade that would start at 3 p.m. I thought that was kind of cool. So here's a picture that kind of summarizes that entire day of Saturday, June 15th. Upper right corner, this is the parade, cruising down College Avenue. Again, I apologize. Picture is a little bit rough. There's the parade, which would lead to Goodland Field, and there's the general right there. And in case you can't see it, that microphone says WWII on it. His speech and the events and speeches from other people during that day were actually broadcast on the radio live, which was pretty cool. I did, as a kind of a history geek, I did actually contact WWII to see if they happen to have anything, and they kind of laughed. After they stopped laughing at me, do you happen to have a recording of that? And he said, no. Here's the viewing stand of the parade, and there's the general right there. Try to see, I think that is, well, we'll talk about it here in a second. That's the viewing stand of the parade. There's the general speaking. In the evening for dinner, there would be a banquet at the Conway Hotel for Company D, and attendance was, here's Mayor Goodland, ex-mayor, Mayor Goodland. That is Mayor Romer, and that is Representative Byrnes, the House of Representatives, congressional representative here for Appleton. He was attending in that banquet. And then finally, the evening ended with a military ball at the Armory, which was pretty cool. So that was a big, big day for Company D as they were honored by the city of Appleton. And finally, on Sunday, June 16th, the weekend ended with a dedication of a memorial plaque honoring the 132 men and women from Appleton who died in World War II. On this picture, you will see on the right here, that is, as the description says, Appleton's own Jack Bradley, or John Bradley as we know. And here is one of the other members from the flag raising, Renee, and I'm going to really mess his name up, so I'm not going to try.
Okay.
Gagnon. So if you've read anything about the flag raising, he was also there. So Bradley and another member from the Uwa Jima flag raising were in attendance that day to present this particular plaque. And the plaque is still around. It's on the 6th floor in City Hall if you want to see it. Again, honoring the 132 men and women from Appleton who died in World War II. All right, to kind of sum it up here, the Red Arrow. The Red Arrow would spend 654 days in combat, the most of any U.S. Army division in World War II. That's the equivalent of 48% of the time the U.S. was in World War II. They were the first unit to take the offensive action against the Japanese, and they were also the first unit to fly soldiers into battle. I can throw another one in there. I believe they were also the first one to have an invasion onto a beach on the northern end of New Guinea. They were the first ones to have that type of attack via a beach landing in World War II for the Americans. Company D in the 127th Regiment, based right out here of Appleton, was among this group of brave soldiers. So with that, I'd like to quote from that Saturday's Days event from the Congressman for Appleton, John Byrnes. He said, "I can think of no better way to pay tribute to a man than to say to him, he served with the 32nd Division." I thought that was pretty cool way to end it. The Company D would be around until the early to mid 60s, and then after the Berlin crisis in 1961, shortly thereafter, there would be a major revamp of the military, and the Red Arrow Division was shrunk into what it is now, which is a brigade. It's no longer the big division that we had. But again, Appleton's connection to Red Arrow should not be forgotten. And if you think about that, Appleton had a National Guard unit based right here in Appleton, a company of soldiers from 1881 to just past 1961, 80 years. So it's pretty phenomenal what these guys and that our history has. And so cool to be able to share and to listen to their stories and to have a real close-up personal connection, if you will, from history through our Appleton guys. So with that, I'm finally done for the evening. My slides are over. One more thing, Gwen, before you take over. Wanted to point this out to everybody. If you wanted to read more about what we talked about here tonight, I highly encourage you to read these two books here. Mark Van El's book came out a couple of years ago about the Red Arrow in the Pacific. He was gracious enough. I reached out to him a number of times and helped me along here with some research stuff. And also shared some stuff from Appleton that he did not know about, which was super cool. The Ghost Mountain Boys, that is the trek in going to Buna from one of the regiments. Incredible journey and experience with some of these guys from the Red Arrow. Appleton was not part of this, but one of the regiments were. So if you're interested in that, highly recommend that book. And then the third book there is All the Hometown Boys, Wisconsin's 150th Machine Gun Battalion in World War I. Again, Appleton. Company G was part of that, which would become Company D of the Red Arrow. So Brad does a really cool job, and I was fortunate and honored to be, he asked me for help on talking about the Appleton, research on the Appleton guys. So if you are interested in that, we also have a table over there that shows a lot of history from the Appleton unit during World War I. And then last but not least, we have a couple of cemetery walks at Riverside on Wednesday the 27th and Sunday, May 31st. It's our Memorial Day walk. So we walk around Riverside and talk about, unfortunately, not all 65 soldiers that are buried there, but we try to make an effort to recognize as many as we can during those walks. And the best part about it, it's free. So same with that one. If you don't like it, you know, full refund. You can make money back. So definitely, if you have a chance or are interested, Gwen and I will be out there on one of those 2 days. So with that, I am done.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
As an aside, my father was in the Red Arrow. out of Marinette Company A.
Okay.
They did the, Beauregard, Livingston, and then
Yeah.
we went to Massachusetts, Fort Devon.
Yes,
They were scheduled to go to Ireland.
Ireland, yes.
And what was said at the time, I don't know if this is true, because the Red Arrow had such a large percentage of German,
Mm,
first generation, second generation, that they were hesitant to send them to Europe. And then they put the whole division on a train out to California for Australia. So I don't know if that is
Interesting.
accurate or true, but
yeah.
it was a true fact that they had a large percentage of
That's-
German.
That's interesting. I hadn't heard that. I definitely know, especially doing some research and presentations on World War I, Appleton and World War I, there was a lot of watch out for the Germans in Wisconsin, especially this area. I mean, the nickname of Wisconsin in World War I was the traitor state. Yeah.
My grandfather was in the border war in the
Okay.
Coast Guard unit too. They sent people to his house because he had a big black handlebar mustache. They had his photo up on the wall. They thought he had a photo of the Kaiser there.
Oh, okay.
It was crazy.
Oh my goodness, that's hilarious. Yes, ma'am.
My grandfather, great grandfather, and great uncle all fought, but with the Oshkosh Division.
Okay. They have a lot of resources there. As a matter of fact, if you go online, you can see a lot of pictures. I think it's on the museum's website, but definitely reach out to them. So that Oshkosh company, do you know if your ancestors of relation were in World War I? World War II, gotcha, okay. All Red Arrows, cool. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say that I was telling you.
Yeah. They recently remodeled that facility, so if you have a chance, you might want to sneak out there and look at it. They have a hallway with some history about them, which includes our guys here. Yes, ma'am.
They don't ever use the J for companies. Why is that?
There's a couple of theories on that. One goes with the old script, that it looked too much like the letter I or L. What was it?
I.
In the written form of the old script, it looked too much like another letter. And then when you started talking to them on the microphone, J, or did you say A? It was more of a, was it phonetics, or how would you
The
say?
phonetic alphabet is Juliet.
Juliet, yeah.
Yeah.
Because of so many Germans here and how many voted against going against war. But I hadn't heard that. Thanks for sharing that.
Do you know
Company?
Company
with the
C.
infantry band?
Company C?
Do you know if there's someone who does what you do similar to this, but with a focus on?
I would highly recommend you reach out to the Oshkosh Museum.
My son signed up for the National Guard back in 2006, 5 it was, and he was told by his recruiter that no soldiers had been from the 227, the Red Arrow Brigade, had been overseas since World War II, and assured us that that was, what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And less than a year later, they got called up to go overseas, and they've been going overseas since then, and we still have some over there today. So, that the 2127th is, and the armory here is very strong still.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing with me. Yeah, there's a great outfit there. So that's one of the reasons why at the time they were not using that. Yeah. Those fun things. Yes. Oh, I thought you were pointing. Yeah.
I have a follow-up on the man in the turquoise about Germanic surnames not being sent to the war in Europe, but to the war in the Pacific instead. This is for Calumet County, but we grew up hearing that story in Calumet County. It was the New Holstein-Kiel area that they were all sent to the Pacific because of the Germanic surnames.
Wow. Okay. Not heard that. It was interesting to read the story of how just like that they were shipped out. I mean, it was just like that.
Bizarre.
It was bizarre, and they were all ready to go. That's something further looking into. Yeah, that's really interesting to hear that. Huh. Yeah. All right. Anybody else? All right, cool. Thanks for coming. I really appreciate it.